Just over 2 years ago, a New York Times investigation into producer Harvey Weinstein opened the floodgates for stories of sexual assault and harassment. Megan Twohey was one of the reporters behind that investigation. She has now co-authored with Jodi Kantor a book detailing how they did it. It's called She Said, Breaking the Sexual Harassment Story that helped ignite a movement, and Megan Twohey joins us now. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me.
It's such a pleasure to meet you. And this book, once you start reading it, you cannot put it down because it has a lot of the what moments. It's great to have you here.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. I mean, we felt like there was so much drama that played out in the pages of the articles that we wrote, but there was also so much drama that played out behind the scenes. And that was initially off the record and kind of in hushed secret meetings. And we really worked hard with this book to bring all of that onto the record so that readers could be there with us and have a front row seat to all of that behind the scenes drama.
So let's go to the very beginning. What prompted you to start looking into Harvey Weinstein?
Well, 2017 was a really significant time for us at the New York Times. Earlier that year, our colleagues broke the story of Bill O'Reilly, probably the most kind of famous and influential conservative media figure in the United States at the time. And they basically did a story that showed that he had paid off, ultimately, I think it was more than $40 million to women who had accused him of sexual misconduct and other abusive behavior. And when that story was published, something remarkable happened.
What was that?
Bill O'Reilly was fired from Fox News, something that had at one point seemed unthinkable. And so we at the New York Times took that moment to say, are there other, this now sort of seems like a quaint question, but we asked ourselves, are there other powerful men who have engaged in abuse of women and covered it up? And Harvey Weinstein had been, probably one of the most powerful figures, powerful producers in Hollywood, had long been rumored to be a sexual predator. And we decided that this was the time to really pursue those rumors and see if there was truth to them.
But at the beginning, you weren't really sure if you should be a part of this, right?
Yeah. Well, I will confess, I had been doing reporting on Donald Trump in 2016. I had worked on the stories of women who came forward with allegations of sexual misconduct against him. And then I'd gone off on maternity leave after he was elected. And when I was returning to the newsroom after my maternity leave, Jodi had already started the Weinstein investigation. And there was a question if I would go back to reporting on Trump or if I would join her in the reporting on Weinstein. And at that point, she had started to hear some early stories from actresses, including people like Gwyneth Paltrow, who was longtime one of our secret sources, who were finally able to reveal the role that she played in our investigation. But I will confess that it was a little difficult for me to grasp the fact that people like Gwyneth Paltrow and Ashley Judd were kind of victims in need of help of the New York Times.
Why
like
is
these
that?
Celebrities with all of their wealth and all of their influence and seemingly all of their power. One of the kind of pillars of investigative reporting is to help give voice to the voiceless. And it was just very hard for me to conceive of some of these famous celebrities as people in need of the help and reporting of the New York Times. But Jodi said something to me that really stuck, which was, listen, no, Megan, if these women have also been victims of sexual harassment, it suggests that nobody is immune. And if we can nail this story, we might be able to really help make a difference.
Any idea, because we find out in the book, the names, the actresses, like these are people that people know about all, like every day talking about them over dinner, over coffee or whatever. Is there any idea how many women were victimized and sexually harassed by Harvey Weinstein?
Well, there have now been more than 80 women who have come forward with allegations of sexual harassment and sexual assault and rape against him. But you have to remember that in 2017, this was for years and years, there had been reporters who had tried to do this story and had failed. They got stuck. Women were terrified, at least in 2017 and before, to go on the record and go public with their allegations against him. His power in Hollywood was so great that even famous women feared that they would suffer damage to their careers, that he would retaliate against them if they spoke out.
We're going to talk more about some of the ways that was done, some of the amount of power that he held. But along the way, just to even get started, you also had to go around certain roadblocks to get people to talk to you. What are some of the challenges that you experienced in trying to get the story?
Well, once again, one of the challenges, and there were many challenges as we tried to get the story. The first was the kind of cloak of secrecy, the fear that so many women had of speaking out for fear of retaliation, or that they would suffer damage to their careers if they spoke out. We also encountered secret settlements. These are tools that are used basically every single day in cases of sexual harassment and sexual assault, not just in the United States, but here in Canada. When women experience a victimization of some kind, they will often go to attorneys because they want to do something about it and they want to hold that person accountable. And they're told time and again that the best, if not only option, is to accept money in exchange for silence. And so, for example, there was a young woman who had worked for Harvey Weinstein in 1990, right out of college, and had disappeared from the company following an alleged sexual assault. And so I was ultimately able to track her down in a home outside of New York. I'd been trying and failing to reach her at her office, and so I finally showed up on a doorstep of a family home with a handwritten note that I was intending to give to her, a family member to pass on to her. So she opens the door. It's actually her. She's there. And
she's very surprised to see you.
And she's very surprised to see me. But she also says, I've been waiting for this knock on my door for 25 years. And yet, she was legally prohibited from telling me what had happened to her. She turned out to be one of at least 12 women victims who had been silenced by Weinstein through these secret settlements.
And you did more reporting on the story for this book, including new information about Lisa Bloom. Who is she?
So there were so many surprising figures that we encountered in the course of our investigation. There were some of the surprising figures who helped bring the truth to light. Some of our secret sources, like Gwyneth Paltrow, for example. There was also Erwin Ryder was the corporate accountant to the Weinstein Company for 30 years, and he ultimately became another one of our very secret and valuable sources, slipping us internal company records that helped reveal the way that Harvey Weinstein had been treating his female employees. So there were also some surprising figures who helped conceal the truth, and I would say that Lisa Bloom was probably the most surprising of all.
Why was she surprising?
I mean, she's probably, imagine the most famous feminist attorney in the United States. Actually, her mother, Gloria Allred, is also very famous in terms of attorneys who have really been at the forefront and on TV, representing victims of sexual harassment, representing victims of sexual assault, really seemingly, at least publicly, working to help bring them voice and fight on their behalfs. And in 2016, she crossed sides to work for Harvey Weinstein. And we knew that. We got glimpses of it at the time. She was by his side as he was working to fight our investigation. But she claimed later that she had only gone to work for him because she thought that he had made inappropriate comments towards women and that she wanted to help him apologize. And in the course of reporting this book, we were able to obtain confidential records, her own billing records, basically a job interview memo that she had sent to Weinstein that revealed that she played a much darker role and was aware of much more serious allegations against him. In this job memo that she sends to him, she basically says, I'm going to take all of my experience working with victims and harness that and work with you to work against them.
And in the book, reading the book, some of the women who had these NDAs, non-disclosure agreements signed with Harvey Weinstein, said to you that the reason why they went to her was because she fought for victims, only to then.
Yeah. Right. So Lisa Bloom, I mean, I think that she, in terms of the work that she did, the role that she played in this Weinstein story was probably the most jaw-dropping of all, because she really did go to work by his side to help him sort of smear his accusers, to help conceal the truth. Her mother, Gloria Allred, also played a surprising role. She was somebody, she's like her daughter, she is somebody who has been openly out there seemingly seeking to give voice to victims of sexual harassment and sexual assault, fighting on their behalf. And what we realized that she had also, kind of behind the scenes, she has been one of the lawyers who has really made a fortune working on these secret settlements that have silenced victims. So in 2004, there was a young woman, Ashley Matthau, who had been working as a backup dancer in a Harvey Weinstein movie when he showed up on set and badgered her into a meeting, a work meeting in his hotel room where he allegedly sexually assaulted her. And when she came back, as she was so upset by what happened, and when she was trying to figure out what to do, her fiance at the time said, "You should go talk to Gloria Allred." I mean, he had seen her on TV, and so she goes to Gloria Allred seeking help and is basically steered into a secret settlement in which she was, legally prohibited from ever telling anybody what had happened. And Gloria Allred has worked on she and her firm have worked on secret settlements that have silenced a lot of the alleged predators who have been revealed in recent years.
I mean, beyond these settlements that were, with the agreements that were signed, so it meant that these women couldn't speak to you. Getting people to talk to you was also really difficult. What did you say to these women who had been victimized and harassed? How did you get them to open up to you and to talk to you about some of their darkest moments?
There are so many reasons not to talk to a reporter, especially about an issue like sexual harassment or sexual assault. We were often asking women to open up about what was likely the most painful experience that they had ever gone through in their entire lives. And there was so much other fear surrounding speaking out about these types of alleged violations. And so one of the cases that we made was to say, listen, we can't change what's happened to you in the past, but if you work with us and we're able to expose the truth, we might be able to help protect other people, and we might be able to put your private pain towards some constructive use. Remember that as we continued with our investigation, we were uncovering allegations of sexual harassment and sexual assault that stretched from 1990 all the way up through 2015. We were identifying a financial trail of payoffs that had silenced at least 12 women over that stretch of time. We were starting to hear from many, many, many other women who had horrifying stories. And so the moral stakes of our investigation continued to rise. We realized that if we weren't able to publish this story, that he would likely go on to allegedly hurt other people.
Is that another reason why? Because beyond reading the book and about what happened with Harvey Weinstein, I thought this was a really great book. It was like a masterclass in investigative journalism. You were getting on planes, flying across the ocean, trying to meet these women in person to establish trust. Is that why you persisted? You were also being followed. You were told, both you and Jody, assume your phones are tapped. This is it sounds like a movie, like straight out of a screenplay.
Well, that was another thing that we were so glad to have the opportunity to take readers behind the scenes of this investigation and basically to be there with us on our first hushed phone calls with actresses like Gwyneth Paltrow, Ashley Judd, Rose McGowan, but also in pursuit of we realized as we continued reporting that there was a whole nother category of alleged victims. Women who had gone to work for Harvey Weinstein and his companies, often their first jobs out of college, as assistants, as junior executives. And we realized that, like the actresses, they too had had their professional ambitions turned against them by the boss. And so as he preyed on them as well. And so we realized that basically there were countless women who may have been hurt by this powerful producer, and that if we weren't able to stop him, that he may go on to hurt more people. So we really felt motivated to do as much as possible to try to nail this story. Also recognizing that he was going to be coming at us in this investigation with all of his resources and with all of his determination. And so our editors had, in one of the meetings that we had early on, warned us, and they had said, listen, you should assume that you're being followed, assume that every phone call is being recorded. And so we had some sense that he was going to be coming after us with private investigators. Only later did we realize that he was working with an investigative firm of a whole nother order. Black Cube, he had hired Black Cube, which is made up of former Israeli intelligence officials. And they were promised a $300,000 bonus. He had a hit on our investigation, that if the agents, those private spies, who adopted fake identities to target us and to target the women who he feared were going to go on the record with stories against them, that if they were able to sort of succeed in stopping the investigation, that there would be a huge financial reward for them.
How much did the people inside the company know about what was going on?
Well, that was another thing that we were listen, in our first story that we published, we had been able to connect some of the dots about his alleged predation and how he'd been able to cover his tracks. In this book, we were able to bring together so many other pieces of the puzzle. We were able to pull the curtain back on the machinery that was in place to silence women. We also spent a lot of time reporting into the Weinstein Company. This ultimately was a story of complicity, of individuals, of institutions. Harvey Weinstein had been able to use both his first company, Miramax, and then the Weinstein Company as a tool in his alleged predation. He used bonuses, he used contracts, he used assistants, all to help serve the sort of the strategy that he had for preying on women who worked in the company or these actresses. And so we really wanted to know what did the other figures in leadership in the company know about, and what did they try to do to stop this? And we realized that in the course of like 2014 and 2015, there were more and more allegations that were coming into public view for the people in the top of the company, including his brother Bob Weinstein, his brother and co-founder of his companies. And we realized that there were these attempts to intervene, but they were all so narrowly framed within kind of a concern for the liability of the company that they ultimately ignored like the massive moral problem that was staring them in the face.
They ignored the individuals.
Exactly, that ultimately destroyed the company.
What was the moment like when you finally brought the allegations to Harvey?
Wow, that was probably one of the most dramatic 48 hours of in my journalism career. Listen, as part of the final step of due diligence when you're doing an investigation of this kind, you go to the subject with everything that you're preparing to publish, everything you're prepared to say about them in print, and you give them an opportunity to respond. I mean, you do that in the name of fairness, you do that in the name of accuracy. And so, but we knew at that point that Harvey Weinstein was not very trustworthy. We knew that he had amassed a powerful team of lawyers to try to stop us. We suspected that there were private investigators involved. We didn't know the extent. So that really set off when we went to him in October to present him with our findings and said, you've got 48 hours to respond. That really set off like a 2-day roller coaster.
Well, how did he respond?
I mean, he was, first of all, he, on the one hand, he had his lawyers threatening to sue us. On the other hand, he had like Lisa Bloom by his side promising that, she had helped him see the error of his ways and that he was kind of like a dinosaur learning new tricks.
Because he came into the office,
And
right?
then finally, the day before, he barged into the New York Times uninvited. And we really had to decide like what to do about it. And I ultimately decided to take that meeting. I said, okay, come on up. And I think he had expected that he was going to be able to kind of march into the top editor's office and stop this. But instead, I took him into a conference room in the middle of the newsroom with glass walls so that everybody could see him and his lawyers, Lisa Bloom and some other powerful lawyers who were by his side. They'd come in with these folders of information, basically information from the backgrounds of some of the women who are going to be in our story, photos of them, like in friendly poses with him, on the red carpet after the alleged violations, as if that was proof that they weren't telling the truth. And so, if anything, it really just spoke to more about his character and the character of those around him. And I wanted to take that meeting so that he could also see our character and what we were made of, and that we weren't going to be intimidated and we weren't going to be bullied.
I want to read something from an opinion piece that was published this October by one of the women that was in the book, but only came out recently. Her name is Rowena Chu.
Rowena Chu.
And she writes, I am happy that my children can know my secret. I am grateful to be able to be honest with family and friends who are coming forward in droves to offer support. I can briefly glory in the relief that I am no longer sitting on a sickening secret that has finally and ultimately come to light. You conducted a group interview for the book with a group of women who had been victims of sexual assault and harassment by Harvey Weinstein, including Rowena. Who else took part?
Mm-hmm. It was the last piece of reporting that we did for the book. In January of this year, we held a pretty extraordinary group interview. This fall marks the 3rd-year anniversary of the Access Hollywood tape being released, in which Donald Trump was caught bragging in his own words about sort of sexually assaulting women. It's the 2-year anniversary of breaking the Weinstein story, and it's the 3rd-year anniversary of the Kavanaugh hearings in the United States, the Brett Kavanaugh hearings. And we brought together women who were at the heart of all 3 of those stories that kind of ultimately helped shift the culture. So there was Rachel Crooks, who was one of the first women to go on the record with an allegation of sexual misconduct against Donald Trump in 2016, somebody that I had reported on at that time. There were Ashley Judd, Laura Madden, Zelda Perkins, Gwyneth Paltrow, some of the women who had been central to the Weinstein investigation.
And Christine
Blasey Ford, who had granted us the first interviews following her testimony about Brett Kavanaugh. And she, is also featured prominently in our book, the sort of surprising backstory of her private path to testifying. And so we brought all those women together because we recognized that there was that we know the public implications of what they've done, but what we wanted to know what it meant for them privately, what had been the effects for them personally of stepping forward in this manner. And it was clear that for all women, this had been a completely transformative experience. Some of the women had had a more positive experience than others. I would say for Rachel Crooks and Christine Blasey Ford, the 2 women who had made allegations in the political realm, it had been a much more difficult road to travel. But there was one person there, Rowena Chu, who had not gone on the record. She was one of the women who had been silenced by Weinstein through a secret settlement. So even 2 years after the story broke, she had not gone on the record.
She was really nervous about the fallout.
She was very nervous. She was very nervous, but she sat and listened to that group interview. And when she came away, she said, "I'm prepared to go on the record in this book."
Why was this story the one to unleash all that followed afterwards?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I can tell you that we certainly did not see that coming. There was a night, two nights before the story broke, Jody and I had been working around the clock to make sure that we dotted every I and crossed every T, that everything was airtight. And so we hadn't given that much thought to contemplating what the impact of the story would be. We were just focused on nailing it. But at 1 o'clock in the morning, we left the newsroom. We shared a taxi on our way back to Brooklyn. And in the hushed kind of quiet of the cab, we turned to each other and said, "Do you think anybody's going to read this story?" And so we certainly could not have anticipated what was coming. But within days of the story breaking, we got the first hints that something was shifting. Our phones, our emails were flooded with women who were coming forward with their own stories of harassment and abuse. And obviously that played out not just with the kind of tip line at the New York Times, but in newsrooms and on social media across the country and around the world. And so we wanted, our response was to keep reporting. We recognized that the Me Too movement that really took off in earnest in that following year was sort of more vast and significant than we ever could have imagined. And so our response was to keep reporting. And so that's why we push into actually some of the complicated questions that arose in the year or two since then.
Which are?
So we would say, I think that there are 3 really unresolved pressing questions in the Me Too era that we have not been able to come up with answers to. One is, what is the scope of behavior that's under scrutiny? Are we talking just about serious allegations of sexual harassment and assault? Or are we talking about some of the more sort of nuanced, uncomfortable encounters that people can have, like an uncomfortable hand on your back at the office, or bra snapping in high schools, for example? And how far back are we going? Christine Blasey Ford sought to hold Brett Kavanaugh accountable for an alleged encounter that happened in the 80s. So are we going to go back that far? And secondly, what is our process for vetting these allegations? We, as the New York Times, know the process that we follow and describe it in great detail in this book before we publish allegations like this. But when it comes to HR departments, when it comes to the court of public opinion,
like with social media?
Yeah, exactly. What are the sort of standards by which we determine what has actually happened as we seek to determine the truth? And then third is accountability. It's so easy for everybody to insist on accountability, but it's much more difficult to assign accountability. And so we find that often, not only are these questions unresolved, but they often get scrambled. So For example, Senator Al Franken in the United States, there was almost the moment that he resigned, there was like debate over whether or not that was the right thing for him to have done. Before there was any determination or consensus over what he had actually, any of the sort of allegations that he had faced, how much truth there was to those. And so we think that until there can be consensus and sort of further agreement on the new rules of sex and power, that there's likely to continue to be a lot of frustration and confusion around this.
Megan, it's been such a pleasure having you on the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.